Many years ago, the Dalai Lama had just published a book entitled Happiness, and he was being interviewed by the press about the book. And one of the interviewers asked him, Your Holiness, which has been your happiest moment in your life? And he got a sort of a little smile on his face, and he looked at him with a little twinkle in his eye, and he says, I think now, which is a fantastic response, right? I think now, this moment, this is my happiest moment. Obviously, the Dalai Lama was fully present in the moment. And this idea of being present in the moment is not new for us. We hear about it all the time. And yet I don't think it can be overemphasized, because in our mind, we're always on our way to something. We're about to do something. We just did something. We're thinking about the past. We're in the future. So rarely do we find ourselves fully integrated into the present moment. What's on my list? What's next to do? It's rare that we think this moment right here really matters. This moment right here is most important. You know, like I say, we're moving all over the place. And so the gift of meditation, contemplation, being present, is that we bring the mind, the body, the emotions into this present moment. That's the gift. And in that present moment, there's a wonderful joining in which a new discovery of who we are, of life, of peace, of our creativity is found. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this beautiful day, thanking you for tuning in. Thank you for those thumbs up. Also, thank you very much for subscribing. Really helps our channel get out there and circulate. Thank you also for those donations. The links to those donations are below. And so some people describe this way of being as being in a trance. You know, got my list, I'm on my way to something. You know, this moment doesn't seem to be good enough. And frankly, there's a bit of a fear. There's a bit of a fear in coming to this present moment, because we might run into our emotions. We might run into what we're really thinking and feeling in this moment. This trance, this idea of being out there, being back here, is really fueled by a deep-seated fear that something's wrong. And if something's not quite right in life, and if we even go deeper, we might say, something's wrong with me. If I really were to stop and be present with what is in me right now, I might come to realize that something is really wrong with me. And so I avoid it, I detour it, I deflect it, I get out of the way so that I don't have to experience that. How do we wake up? You know, I heard Eckhart Tolle say that all of us suffer from a basic addiction, which is the addiction to the mind. We believe that what our mind is telling us is true. And of course, his invitation through the power of now is to come to the present moment. And yet that present moment scares us. You know, I've heard one person say, you know, I think all of my life, I've been thinking that something's wrong with me. And somebody expressed a truth that I think somewhere inside we all feel. All of my life, I feel that something's not quite right with me. And, you know, if we think that something needs to be different, that life needs to be different, that I need to be different, that we're somehow falling short of the ideal of who we think we should be, well, you know, that puts us in a state of anxiety, of tension, of course, wanting to escape the moment. So that's why I've entitled this message, Love the One You're With. You know, the singer Stephen Stills coined that phrase in his song, Love the One You're With, in which he says, you know, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. And so, we may think that we love that person that we think we are in our mind, the false self that we've identified with. But we can't quite be with that person, right? We can't quite be with that person. So in the wisdom of Stephen Stills, love the one you're with. Love the one that you are authentically. Love the true self, the I am self, the Christ self. Love the authentic self. The Buddha was very clear in his expression about suffering, saying that when we identify with desire, when we're stuck into a concept, that's going to inevitably lead to suffering. All of life is about change, and whatever we're identified with is eventually going to change or disappear, and we're going to go through suffering, through loss and mourning. That limited self that we think we are, it just simply is not going to hold up. There's this wonderful story from Thailand, a true story. I think it was in a small town in Thailand. They had a relatively large Buddha that was covered in clay. It wasn't a very beautiful Buddha, but it was revered by the townspeople, and people would come and visit it. And it had, been there for ages, centuries, right? And it had overcome all kinds of storms and wars and politics and everything. And in one particular dry spell in that area, there was a lot of dryness. And one monk one evening who was walking around decided he would shine his flashlight on the clay of the Buddha. And wouldn't you know that he noticed a glimmer coming reflected back through a crack in the clay, which was very confusing. Upon further investigation in other cracks around the room, they realized that reflection was coming back, and very carefully they began to realize that this clay Buddha, the clay of the Buddha, was really covering up a solid gold, beautiful Buddha. And of course, what the monks said about that Buddha was that it was probably covered in clay to protect it, right? To protect it from invading armies or other peoples. And so I find that to be a perfect analogy for ourselves. We take on a covering of clay. We put on a mask. We say, this is who the world thinks I should be. My happy self, my strong self, my confident self, my creative self. And we go around the world with this clay covering and with this mask on, wanting to be loved and accepted for who we are, but we're not presenting the authentic self, and so we can never be loved. And of course, suffering is produced by identifying with the covering, with the mask, right? If we never show who we are, we're never going to get the love that we're so desperately wanting. And so we've separated from ourselves. We find ourselves lost. We find ourselves yearning. The soul seems to call out, seems to yearn for a connection, for a moment, for an understanding, for a deeper peace. And that comes from a deeper realization of self, of who we really are. If we think about a child and we ask ourselves, well, what would that child most need, right? I believe what that child would most need would be some understanding and love and acceptance. Well, that's true for us as well. We need to be deeply understood, deeply loved, deeply accepted. And we go around the world feeling like, well, I'm not worthy. I'm not loved. I'm not understood. I'm not accepted, which produces a lot of anxiety and suffering inside of us. And so healing, our healing path is to realize that we are, our healing path is getting back into the reality of who we are. And, it's all about bringing acceptance and understanding, compassionate presence to ourselves. and doing it, experiencing it in the moment, when maybe those thoughts and feelings of anxiety, of fear, of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, of all of those critical thoughts or judgments we may have ourselves, if we can bring some attention to those moments, if we can love the one we're with in that moment, the scared one, the weak one, the perceived broken one, if we can bring some acceptance and some compassionate presence to that, it'll heal. It'll begin to heal. We'll begin to be more willing to let go of the clay covering of the mask that we use. This will dissolve the mask so that the light, the creative self, the love will shine through. We resist the present moment. We resist what is right here. And so what I'd like to do today is to offer you a very simple 4-step process that'll help us bring that acceptance and that compassionate presence to ourselves in the moment. It does require having some awareness of where we are and a willingness to be with what is, but it really will help us to heal that part of us that wants to separate our authentic self from the self that we present to the world. Very simple process. Begins with a recognition of where we are. I think all meditation and all prayer always begins exactly where we are. This is maybe the hardest part. The willingness to bring our attention to the present moment, to let go of the list, to let go of what happened yesterday, to let go of everything and just be with what is, and ask yourself that present question: where am I now? Emotionally, what am I feeling? What are the feelings that are going on inside me? My thoughts, what are the thoughts that I'm thinking? What fear thoughts, what shame thoughts, what judgment is in my mind about myself? And we can feel the pain of that, the suffering of that, the trauma of that, the sense of loss of that. And so we recognize, what is here right now. And we acknowledge it, we identify it. We say, well, there's my fear. There's my desperation. Here's my loneliness, right? Here are the crazy thoughts about I'm not enough. There is not enough, right? That sense of recognition begins the path to coming home. Now, having identified those places where we are in thought and in our emotions, we're going to allow them to be. We're going to accept them. We're going to say, okay, fear, you've been with me all my life. You'll probably be with me the rest of my life. You are welcome here. This is a powerful state of consciousness because we're beginning to accept those parts of us which we have rejected or not wanting to see, deny, detoured away from, saying, all those vulnerable, weak, maybe negative or dark places within us, our shadow self, we're beginning to open up to acceptance. Right? Acceptance and compassionate presence is going to help heal the hurt. And so here's where we add the acceptance. You, anxiety, you're welcome here. Here, fear, here the thoughts of scarcity, of not enough, of not being worthy, of not being loved, of being judged and condemned. You're welcome here. The next one is to investigate that a little bit. Not investigate in the intellectual sense there. I'm going to look up in the psychology books what this means. No. This is an inner investigation of the body. Where do I feel it? Is there tension in the stomach, in the chest, in the shoulders, in the neck? Where am I feeling it now? How do I describe that feeling? What are those feelings provoking in terms of beliefs or thoughts? Really investigate the whole cycle that's happening here, mind to heart, heart to mind. Where have I detoured and what's going on here? Really get some clarity about how this whole process works. With that understanding, there can be great healing. And the final part is to add some nurturing, right? This is the compassionate presence part of this. We add some presence in the form of absolutely nurturing this ourselves with kindness. Whatever it is that we find, however terrible it may seem, we've accepted it, we've investigated, and now we're going to hold it with kindness, with loving kindness, including using words saying, well, it's okay, it's going to be all right. I work as a chaplain, and people that I encounter have all kinds of different conditions. One woman that I talked to had the beginnings of Alzheimer's. That's what her psychological chart says. And when I was visiting with her one time, we were talking about something, maybe her family or something, and suddenly she had a lapse. She absolutely forgot what we were talking about. She forgot who I was. Just total blank. And we had enough presence for me to say, okay, just relax for a moment. Don't try to remember. Just take a moment. All right, we paused. And then I said, rather than try to remember what we were talking about, can you just tell me what you're feeling? And she says, well, fear. I said, okay, can you acknowledge it? Can you allow it? Can you let it be? Can you welcome it? She said, yeah. I said, what else? She says, confused. I said, okay, confused. Can you allow it? Can you accept it, that you're confused right now? She says, yeah. What else? Embarrassed. The same thing. Allow, accept. She says, I feel my heart pounding. Okay, good. You're investigating the body. The heart is pounding. Can you accept that your heart is pounding? Breathing. Can you acknowledge that you're breathing? Yeah. And we kind of went down this list of different things. Till she finally says, well, relaxing. I said, okay, relaxing. Can you accept that you're relaxing? Yeah. And as we went through that whole thing, she ended up saying, well, I really apologize. I said, there's no need to apologize. What you've done is a grace-filled moment of profound acceptance and compassionate presence towards your person. And so that was a profound example for me. Once again, recognize where we are, right? The emotions, the thoughts. Allow them, accept them just as they are. Investigate. When you investigate, a great question to ask is, what do I need? What do I need? You know, the woman with Alzheimer's was trying to, get back the memory. But what she really needed was to just relax. It's okay. It's all right. We can be with this just the way it is. What do I need is a great question to investigate. When you come into that, there might be an answer that comes into your mind that says, well, I just need to be. I just want to trust. I just want to breathe. That's all I need right now. And then, of course, this final part, nurture, is so important. Because the truth is, we can nurture ourselves, or I've heard some people call it spiritual parenting. That ideal parent that picks up the child and holds the child lovingly, tenderly, offers it understanding, whispers of love, saying things like, it's okay, everything's going to be all right. I love you so much. It's going to quiet the child, crying child, a desperate child. It's going to quiet them. And so we can find this nurturing either within ourselves, or if we're having trouble accepting it for ourselves, we can bring in some reinforcements. If you're a person who prays and you pray in the name of Jesus Christ, maybe the image of Jesus, maybe a wise sage, maybe you imagine the Dalai Lama sitting there with you, smiling, saying it's okay. Or even the Buddha, right? With his wisdom sitting there, holding you in that wonderful presence. Maybe you need to put your hand on a tree or put your hand on the ground and absorb the wisdom of the earth to bring in that loving nature. Imagine, you don't have to go step outside, just imagine that you're putting your hand on the earth, filling yourself with that strength of the core of planetary wisdom and love. Maybe you think of grandma. Maybe it's the dog who loves you so much. However it is that you bring nurturing to that part of yourself, it's very important for you to just embrace yourself. I wear a chain in which I have a cross around my neck. And so I like to actually put my hand right here, which is where the cross hangs. And that cross is a symbol for me of the presence of love, of the overcoming nature of spirit, of the presence of Jesus. And I hold my hand there, and it's such a powerful reminder of love. And so what I'd like to do with you today is to invite you to do this little practice with me today. Okay, I'm going to invite you to think of a situation in which you felt attacked. Either you attacked yourself, you attacked others, a place you don't feel very good about, maybe in a relationship, maybe something at work, maybe something to do with your health, maybe something you're worried about, something you're fearful about, something you're judgmental about, either for yourself or for others. And if you can, go back to the triggering moment, the moment in which it was most strongly felt. And always we begin this process, we begin with some breathing. I always like to begin with the breathing. And so as I breathe in, I'm bringing to mind a moment in which once upon a time, I was the president of an association, large group of people, and I went through the board of directors and was finally elected president. And it was such an honor. And I served for 1 year, which was the normal term. And it was a great experience, and I felt like I really made a great contribution. But when the year ended and I had to turn the gavel over to the next president, there was a huge drop in me. You know, I lost a sense of purpose and meaning, whereas for that last year I was very busy and engaged and I was really on fire. I felt like I was really making a huge contribution. Suddenly I was a nobody. Suddenly I wasn't doing anything. Nobody was congratulating me. Nobody was thanking me. I felt very low. I had identified with a false sense of self, you see. And so I'm going to choose that moment in which I turned the gavel over and I sat down in my chair and I felt everybody's adoring eyes and energy towards the next president, which wasn't me. And the emptiness that I felt in that moment. I'm going to choose that moment for our exercise today. You choose your own moment. So as I transport myself there, which in truth is, if I still feel that within myself, is very much in the present moment. You know, as I remember that emotion still lives in me. So it's very real. It's a present moment experience, you see. And so I'm remembering that moment now. And I'm breathing. And I'd like you to join me in this, okay? So take that situation. pause, right? Just bring it in. Allow yourself to feel that feeling. It's a recognition. And see if you can identify, even out loud, what those emotions are. And as I'm sitting with you here, I'm just going to express my own feelings, which may not be yours, but feeling of emptiness, of hurt, anger, right? Anxious. Those feelings are provoking thoughts of not enough, not worthy, lost, homeless, or hopeless even. And I'm just naming these things, identifying, recognizing. You see, this is what we're doing, the first step, recognizing. And as these emotions come up, you might just ask yourself, am I willing to accept them? Can I accept this feeling of emptiness, this anxiety? Can I accept this hurt? Sometimes you have to breathe a little bit. Can you accept the anger? Can you accept the thoughts of not worthy, not enough, of being marginalized, being left out? I would say even betrayed is what I'm feeling. Betrayed is more of a thought, but it goes with a sense of loss, grief, right? So I'm feeling all that, and I'm also allowing myself to feel it. Do they have a place within me? Yes, they do, absolutely. And so I'm going to go a little deeper now and investigate that. And what's coming up in my mind is a belief. This is interesting. This is just happening to me as I'm recording this with you. And I see that the hurt of that back then basically motivated me not to get so deeply involved in other organizations. Why? Because if I did, and if it was successful, that too would end, right? And I'd have to go through the same suffering. So why expose myself to that? You see the thinking that's happening? I'm investigating this now. And that maybe, I'm not quite sure right now, but maybe it kept me away from opportunities that life presented which I didn't take advantage of. But I'm investigating. I'm allowing, and I'm kind of mixing these steps together, but I recognize more thoughts, I recognize more feelings. It's all okay, accepting. And then finally I come to nurturing. I can put my hand on my heart and this cross that I wear around my neck. And I'm just going to talk to my hurt self, my angry self, my empty self, my anxious self. Say it's okay. It's okay to feel that. It's okay to think that. I can even say things like, I care about your suffering, talking to myself here. And as I'm talking, I'm also invoking the loving presence of Jesus in my life. That's for me. It may not be for you, but I'm just imagining that the love of Jesus is right here with me, shining that God-like presence, inviting me, loving me. It's okay. It's all right. And so what I'm saying to you today, and we've done this kind of briefly, it can go along a little deeper, but that type of exercise will bring down the mask. Will allow me to step forward, maybe more creatively, more authentically. You know, in the Bible, the famous moment in which Jesus asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? And some of the disciples says, well, you're John the Baptist, and you're this and you're that, you're Elijah. And it was Peter who, after a moment of pausing and profound contemplation of, I believe, connecting with the heart, says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Yes." And Peter, upon that rock, upon that foundation, upon that solid idea, I will build my church. Because the other disciples were answering very much from the superficial level. What mask are you wearing? What clay is covering your gold? And Peter went all beyond that, went right to the essence and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And so as you ask yourself that question, who do people say that you are? Who do people say that you are? Well, I'm the son, I'm the father, I'm the husband, I'm the employee, I'm the co-worker, I'm the friend, I'm the whatever it is, I'm the man. Beyond all that, even with my anger, with my hurt, and with my emptiness, even with a sense of loneliness, judgment, unworthiness, allowing it to be, including that in the realm of consciousness that I am, I can say, I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, the daughter of the living God. Love the one you're with, not the one that you're identified with, projecting to the world. Love the one you're with, the Christ, the Son, the daughter of the living God. That will always be who you truly are. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you, blessing you on this wonderful day. Thanking you for tuning in. Thank you for the thumbs up, the subscriptions. The donation links are below. Reminding you today and always, life is consciousness. Consciousness is life.